Hi, and welcome back to Continual. Tonight, I'm going to be your host, Jim Nettles, and we're going to be talking about the fun topic of the future of plagues and contagions in writing. So tonight, we have a lot of experts in the field to come and have a fun time this evening as we try to kill the entire population. But before we get started, let's go around and see who has joined us for the evening. So Richard, you are up first.
Hi, I'm Richard Fife. I'm the author of Conflict Born, a gaslamp fantasy with bisexual sky pirates. Sky swashbuckling and romance and political intrigue. No contagions actually in that one, but I write more about that kind of stuff in my short fiction. So,
Misty?
Hi, I'm Misty Massey. I'm the author of the Mad Kestrel series of pirate fan adventures. I am also an editor for Lore Seekers Press. And when I'm not doing bookish type stuff, I play Malibu, the cheerful sun-drenched cleric on the Calamity Janes podcast, the sister podcast to the Authors and Dragons.
Shauna?
So hi, I'm Seanan McGuire, but when I'm not, I'm Mira Grant. And as Mira, I primarily specialize in biomedical science fiction novels about horrific pandemics. So I'm having a great time.
Fraser?
I'm Fraser Sherman. I write fantasy, mostly historical, also a lot of movie reference books, that is. So I'm interested in the way themes develop over time, like pandemics, alien invasions, all kinds of things.
And Lola?
My name's Lola Strickland. I write novels and fiction and poetry. In fact, right now I pulled up two of my stories that have to do with zombies.
So as we're going to be having fun talking about pathogens and contagion this evening, the first question I've got for everybody, because I've been doing a lot of work actually in the real world having to deal with it and how we're responding and reacting to it. What do you guys think in terms of how we've seen the world react to a global pandemic versus what you would have thought you'd have done if you'd have been putting this in a fictional tale? So Richard, how about you?
I'd say I actually feel like the government's acted faster than I typically think in stories. As that it's a weird thing to say because there's also a lot of feeling like they didn't do enough. But it does feel like when it is shown in stories, or when I think about it in stories, it tends to be an even worse reaction than what actually did happen. So it's kind of like a weird, low bar to get over, but good job getting over it.
Misty, how about you?
Well, yeah, I agree. I think the government did better than I was expecting, maybe. I'm more of a fan of contagion fiction, movies and books, rather than a writer of it. So I can't say what I would have done. However, from the point of view of the things that I've watched and read, I feel like our government was maybe easy playing it just a little bit. And I would have hoped that something that I wrote, maybe they would have, I don't know, been a little more proactive a little sooner. I'm not sure, but it just did seem, it seemed like in the real world it was a little low key, and I would have preferred a little harder line, even though then you run into the tyrannical kind of government stuff and people get all excited about that too. So I don't know.
Shannon?
So I've written this exact scenario multiple times, and I would never, in a book that I expected people to publish, read, enjoy enough to review any of that, would never have gone to the sheer depths of pointless evil that we hit very quickly in the current Panini. The fact that we had actual politicians going on actual television and saying, Grandma wants to die for the economy. There's been a eugenicist streak in American culture. We know that. It's here from the beginning. That doesn't make it okay, but that means it's not a surprise. We like to pretend it's not there. We like to have this illusion that we are communally good people. And the fact that it went so very quickly from let's close down to keep people safe to capitalism has to win. I was genuine. I was not stunned by the government lowballing it. I was stunned by us having actual audio records of government officials stating, I know how bad this is. I know it's going to be ugly. Let's keep lying about it. And that not causing an immediate revolution. I was genuinely stunned by the selfishness and cruelty of individual people. Like, I need to have a haircut right now. It doesn't matter if you are immunocompromised and share a house with me. My need for a haircut matters more than your life. And we saw that narrative again and again and again. The people scalping and hoarding personal protective equipment early on. You know, even the decisions that make sense, like it made sense for the CDC to initially say masks were not going to help us because we had so few and no one anticipated the sudden homemade mask craze, which was great. But even the things that made sense at the time, which then changed in the face of context, just got washed away by the sheer waves of human selfishness. And I would not write this story because no one would read it voluntarily. It's not much fun.
Fraser, how about you?
Much like Seanan, it's really astonishing to look, for example, at the number of people who approach this as an opportunity for grift. Matt Staver, who is a prominent anti-gay lawyer, started running ads, send me money to fight the vax mandate. The vax will download the internet into your brain. People have committed suicide after taking the vaccine. I'm going to guess he is smart enough to know this is bullshit, but there is money at it, and spreading the bullshit is going to make him a profit. There was a lot of money made by writing prescriptions for ivermectin and some of the other crackpot solutions. Also, the fact that so many people, even when they were reasonably aware that this was a serious problem, their leaders had told them, this is unimportant, it's just a plot, ignore it, and they jumped on it. Even to the point of things like, aha, I have a fake ADA card. Now I can go into a store without a mask. I once conceived of a story which involved somebody, a big villain spreading plague by various nefarious tactics, but I wouldn't have thought it was so easy to do. It's kind of depressing.
Yeah.
Lola?
Well, if you'd asked me 3 years ago what a plague would look like and how our government would react, I would be like, well, as we know from all the movies and books and everything, the government won't have time to react because everybody will die within a few days. So it never even occurred to me to think about how the government react, because everybody would just be a groundswell of people just trying to help each other and, trying not to get killed by the zombies and stuff. So it never even occurred to me that there would be protocols and people would try to, manipulate it and things like that. So when this actually happened, for 2.5, almost 3 years, we've been slugging through, just the worst kinds of government manipulation. I was like, well, this is a bummer. I'd rather have zombies.
This is not the apocalypse we were promised.
It wasn't.
Right.
And I want to kind of revise or qualify my answer. In that when I was thinking about what the question, and that's why I said, don't make me go first, Jim. I was thinking
You did not pay the moderator enough.
Okay, yeah, I won't give you scotch. But yeah, so I was thinking more in terms of incompetence versus willful evil. And I was also thinking they're both causes for bad things happening, yes. But it's like, it just kind of feels like these stories that I've consumed have been where the government doesn't even acknowledge that it's a problem, doesn't know that it's a versus the selfishness and greed aspect of individuals, of entire segments of society. And so it's like we as a society bungled this horribly.
Well,
I definitely think
Yeah.
that's true.
let me kind of build on that. So if we look at and take this as a learning experience, if we look at everything that has gone on and happened, everything from including masks, or maybe talking about how we've seen people behave, and how we've watched human behavior, governmental behavior, all of these things. How do you think this is going to influence your writing going forward? Are you going to be including some of these kinds of elements if you're writing something that is set in, roughly present day, modern world, this sort of thing? Or is it going to fall as an influence potentially in other things like that you're writing? How about you, Misty?
Well, fortunately, I write in the two worlds that I write in right now. One is a fantasy world, which is not related to our world. And then the other one is 1890s out west in America. And so I can deal with the illnesses that historically we've already dealt with, but I don't have to deal with this one, thank goodness, because it would just be, it would be interesting. I've thought about that a lot, especially in the things that I'm reading these days, because I'm now reading books that have been written since the beginning of everything. And I wonder sometimes, why do we not have masks? Why do all the characters not have masks on? Because it seems like they should. And television and movies are the same way. Why are people not walking around with masks on in all these shows? So that's something that, it's already changed the way that I look at the world just generally, because I expect to see not all masking, because like Seanan said, there's a whole bunch of our population that are just jerks and won't protect each other no matter what. But I still do see masking going on in my own community, and it would be nice to see that reflected in current fiction.
Seanan?
No, I don't know whether I will ever be able to write another pandemic. I find diseases fascinating. I love the way that they progress. I love the different things they can do. That doesn't mean I want to share a room with them, but I like to study and look at them and hard. In the last week, I have seen people saying that the government reaction to polio was draconian and an over response because less than 10% of children are permanently paralyzed. And when you actually look at the figures on the current panini, both the short-term illness and the long-term effects that we're still documenting, it is worse than polio, not on an individual level, but on a social level. And when I've actually received email in the last couple of months from people complaining at me about how woke and biased my pandemics published 10 years ago were, because I said things like, quarantine is good, actually, and there is no moral justification for breaking isolation when you're infectious. I do not like being yelled at for things I didn't do. I do not like being treated like I'm trying to drive home a politically biased moral when I say wash your hands. So how is this going to influence my fiction? I have a lot less trust in people. I have actually seen how many people will hide the zombie bite. I love zombie films. I've always been a big consumer of zombie literature. We had incidents at San Diego Comic-Con and Norwestcon within the last year of people testing positive and continuing to attend the convention and admitting that they had tested positive and were continuing to attend the convention because their enjoyment, their FOMO mattered more than the lives of the people around them.
Right.
So that was my full point. I'm very depressing.
Well, Fraser, how about you?
Most of my fantasy these days is set 20th century at some point. So there would be either polio, which was before my time as a serious threat, or AIDS, which I do remember. The thing that leaps out at me compared to the pandemic fiction I have seen, I've never actually written any, is how it always seems to focus on people dying. And what we have seen the past 2 years is how it affects society, personal contact, our inability to see family or friends, the impact on the economy. And this is stuff which is certainly part of the history, but I've had friends talk about how when there was polio outbreak in their town, everything closed down, everyone was quarantined, no kids got to play with anyone, but it's not something that has really made its way into fiction. So it would definitely make its way into mine if I write anything. I'm curious if it affects others as well.
Lola, how about you?
I think if I did, it would be in passing. Like if I had a character who was immunocompromised, I might have her putting on a mask or something. But I think once you bring the specific unpleasantness into a book, then you really have to spend a lot of time on it, because it would feel kind of disrespectful just to kind of mention in passing, oh yeah, you know, that unpleasantness we had, oh, that was nothing. You know, it would have to really be a big part of it for me to go into detail about it. So I think it was probably something I wouldn't do unless I felt I needed to.
Richard?
I think what is just kind of resonating for me, thinking about, you know, how it affects my writing, is just the cultural differences of, because I like writing books with lots of different cultures and lots of different societal backgrounds to people, and just thinking about how, you know, different countries have reacted to the recent pangolin is, you know, versus, you know, we have some countries that had really tight lockdowns, but now they're very vaccine resistant, and they have low vaccination rates, or countries that were more authoritarian versus ones that just pretended it wasn't happening. It's like, you know, in the same way that, you know, no people are a monolith, it's like no government or no society was a monolith. It was a different experience in every region, despite the global trauma. I think I'd be wanting to make sure that came through.
So looking at kind of the things that we've seen and learned, okay, and there you're back. So Seanan, I do want to hit you with this question, because you've written a lot about contagions, pathogens, you know, as Mayor Grant, that's pretty much the brand. So when you look at stories coming forth, and you've already said you're not sure you can write another contagion or a pathogen novel, is there anything you've done so far that you would change? Or is there, you know, as we look at in the middle of one pandemic, now we see an explosion of monkeypox, and we see how health departments in certain countries have reacted to that even.
So I literally wrote this situation in a book called The Kingdom of Needle and Bone, where it was a cascading series of different pandemics. All we needed was one good EMP for the immune system, and there are several viruses that can do that. So cascading pandemics is not uncommon. Stephen King did it in The Stand. You know, you primarily have Captain Trips, which is the super flu, and that's what we all focus on, because Captain Trips is what, as Lola mentioned, killed everybody, just bang, 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 and that's super fascinating. That's an enthralling sequence. And then in the aftermath, we have the secondary pandemic, which is people dying of the sudden absence of everything. You know, someone dies of bad dental work, someone dies of appendicitis. And we see this secondary pandemic, which is described as a secondary plague in the book, as it moves through the surviving cast. So stacking plagues on plagues has always been a narrative device that people use. In some zombie fiction, the stuff that takes more time than a 90-minute Resident Evil movie, you will have the issue of the zombies are disease carriers crop up as a plot point and something that the survivors have to contend with. So again, not new. Honestly, the only thing that's new about the monkeypox situation is that when the current Panini first started, we had a massive misinformation campaign that I still don't understand the motivations behind. And I have dug as deep as I can trying to get it, of people who were just fucking determined that we would not believe COVID was airborne. They were absolutely committed to the idea that COVID could not be airborne. This was just before the start of the 2020 convention season. And in the before times, every year on Twitter, just as the convention season was kicking off, I would do a thread about how to protect yourself from con crud. And in that year's thread, which did happen barely before COVID happened, but before everything happened, and I think we're deep enough in that I shouldn't get us in trouble there. Sorry about that. You know, we were just before it happened. There was a tweet in the thread that did mention the current Panini by name and said, if you follow these steps, it will go a long way toward protecting yourself from this thing, seasonal flu, and other airborne diseases. I did not directly say that the current situation was airborne. I just conflated it with other airborne diseases because anyone who understands how this particular pathogen works already knew it was airborne. We knew that. This was not a shock. This was not a surprise. The Newsflash trilogy is legitimately about this form of pathogen. I spent 4.5 years consulting with the CDC on how this specific virus works. We all knew, but I said that, and my Twitter was brigaded for days by people who needed to scream at me for even implying that it was airborne, because it was not airborne, because we couldn't accept that it was airborne. We had to believe, for some reason that, again, I still do not understand, and you can tell it bothers me that I don't understand this. We needed to believe that the current Panini was entirely fomite based. For any listener or any viewers who don't know what a fomite is, a fomite is one of the primary mechanisms of virus transmission. It means that when you touch a surface, if you are infected, the virus remains behind on the surface. And that is why we had such a run on sterilizing wipes and Clorox at the beginning of the Panini. Now, washing your hands is always a good idea, even without a fomite base. Many viruses that are not fomite transmitted are fecal oral, which is disgusting. And if you flush the toilet while you're still in the bathroom, you will get flecks of human feces on your hands, whether or not you have pooped recently. It's great. The body is a wonderland. So washing your hands is always good, but the current Panini does not have a strong fomite base. It's difficult to catch it by touching simple surfaces. Monkeypox is very fomite based. It's also airborne, but that's part of why it's spreading the way that it's spreading. With COVID, if we were, God damn it, I'm sorry, I keep getting excited because it's not excitement, that's the wrong word, but I don't have the right word. With the current situation that we've been in for the last 2 years, if you were wearing a really good mask, I was wearing a really good mask, we were both fully clothed, and I hugged you glancingly because you were going through a personal tragedy or something, the odds are pretty decent that I would not contract anything from you, as long as we remain masked and did not make an extended contact. With monkeypox, if you dress yourself, your hands have transferred fomites to your clothing. Those fomites can live for up to 13 hours on a fabric surface. Depending on how long ago you got dressed, they may still be active. When I hug you, I transfer those fomites to my clothing. And then if I don't go through a full decontamination protocol when I get undressed, I am potentially going through my entire evening beauty routine, you know, brushing my teeth and all of that with live monkeypox fomites on my hands. That is a very different situation than we have been dealing with. And that's going to be the interesting thing about this particular pandemic stack. You know, it's like playing Magic the Gathering. Triggers go off in the order that they were established in the game. So we've got all these people that have gotten kind of lackadaisical about their fomite maintenance that are suddenly going to be in a, what is for most of us, primarily fomite-based pandemic. It's going to be a party.
Joy.
Does hand sanitizer help?
Hand sanitizer does help with the majority of viral fomites. It does assist with the orthoviruses, which includes monkeypox. Soap and water is always better. But really the main thing is going to be if you leave the house and touch anything that is not like the inside of your own car, so you've touched nothing, you need to treat your clothes like you've been in a biohazard facility. Strip them off, put them straight into the laundry basket, put them straight into the wash your hands, decontaminate yourself. And I know that sounds extreme. And for the majority of us, monkeypox is not going to be that big of a deal, but the majority is not everyone. I have friends who are pregnant right now. Monkeypox would almost certainly kill their babies. I have other friends with extremely weak immune systems. Plus, even if it's no big deal, the facial scarring it can cause, this is America. We are the shallowest of nations. And if you've got a disease that's actively making you unattractive to people, that is going to ruin lives, even if you survive.
So Fraser, any thoughts?
Does To follow that one up, no, I got nothing.
Well, let's kind of actually go and start working from this point to start talking about, what are the things that we do in terms of storytelling going forward? We talked a little bit about what are the elements we're going to carry forward, but if we look at, for example, the things that we have learned about, again, human behavior, governmental behavior, and the things that we see that are going on, what are the sorts of elements that you might want to work with? Even in a fantasy universe or a fantasy world, what are the things that this is starting to inform you about how people act and behave?
You have
So,
to
Fraser?
call on someone.
Oh,
Oh,
incredibly. I mean, it's
Oh,
not like
let's
having.
break the start.
Oh, sorry. You want to go first? Or I'll go first.
No, go.
It's not like I was unaware how easily people could be manipulated and led, but it is really startling to actually see it happen to this degree. Their leaders said it was not a problem. Masks are part of a plot to control the people in some vague and nefarious fashion. And they decided this was now the orthodoxy and they will not hear any contrary viewpoints. And if I were writing something, that would probably work its way in, though I am not sure how. But then again, if I was writing something, I'm not sure I would believe the kind of behavior we've seen, because it is so absurd and so self-destructive and so contrary to any degree of common sense. So I don't know.
Lola?
I have an aunt by marriage, and funny thing is, her and my uncle, she and my uncle are divorced. So I don't even know if I call her aunt anymore. I don't know. I haven't talked to her since in probably 10 years, but I'm still on her Facebook. And I always knew she was conservative, but I never knew how like crazy QAnon she was. She, when the pandemic first started and when people first started wearing masks, she put a meme up that had a woman with, a mask on, and it says, "They want you to wear this." And then they show the same woman with a hijab on, and it says, "So that you'll wear this," meaning that they're trying to turn us Muslim. Oh my God. So my mouth dropped, and I still think about that. I'm like, wow, I didn't know people before. I had no idea. And so I think maybe with characters in the future, I might get a little deeper and kind of, so some of the characters that maybe I don't like as much, that I kind of want to make fun of, I'm going to have them, say some truly ridiculous things. I might have a little fun with it.
Misty?
I agree. It was a surprise to me how many people turned out to be super ultra scary conservative in my life that I didn't even realize before, because it had just never come up. So I have a neighbor across the street. I don't know him very well, but he has a garden. And every year he would bring some of the spoils of his garden over for my husband, because he grows peppers. And not this year, but last summer, he came over and knocked on the door with a bag of peppers. Well, I put on my mask before I opened the door, because I've just gotten to where that's common courtesy, because he doesn't know where I've been. And so I'm just going to do the very least I can. So I put on my mask, I opened the door, and he goes, "Why are you wearing that? You don't have to wear that. That's foolish." And I said, "Well, I want to wear it. It makes me feel comfortable." And he said, "Well, you're just buying into all the nonsense. And don't you know they're just trying to control you?" And I said, "Thanks for the peppers." And sure, he had not spoken since, because I know now that he's not somebody that we can see eye to eye at all. And up until then, I had no idea. And it disappoints me somewhat. That whole, like Seanan was saying, the sudden understanding of how very selfish and even evil ordinary people can be to each other, just because they don't want to be inconvenienced in some way. I mean, I don't like wearing a mask. It's not
I don't like wearing
fun.
a bra.
I get out of breath sometimes. Right, girl? I don't like wearing a bra either. Yeah. But I mean, I do it because it's about more than just me. And I don't understand why I can see that nobody else can, or so many other people around me cannot. And that's something that has changed how I create characters in a certain way, because now I know that everybody's not going to be helpful and nice, and there are a lot more of them are going to be awful. So,
Richard?
I think something I've internalized is just how much people that used to be close can have differing trauma responses to something like this, and how it will completely change their relationship. And that I always feel like there's like supposed to be some sort of hopeful, maybe during the madness, people break into tribes and it's horrible, but we hope that maybe there is a time afterwards when we can come together and try to rebuild humanity. And it's just feeling like this is even if this, as it hopefully starts waning, with the vaccinations and booster shots that are going to be effective towards newer variants, and things move towards endemic status, it just feels like it's still going to end up with giant scars across society, of relationships, families torn apart, old friendships destroyed, and that will never come back. And it's not born of evil. It is born of people just having different trauma responses and different things they run to try and find security and safety in the madness.
That's such
Shauna?
a nice way to look at it. That's so kind.
So I'm the one that brought the word evil to the conversation,
Mhm.
but I do feel it's important to distinguish between the evil of governments, people that are relatively protected, that are making these decisions and foisting them on everyone else, and ordinary people who have frankly been the victims of an orchestrated PSYOP program for years. My mother joined Facebook so that she could look at pictures of her nieces and nephews. Her brother was a veteran, her brother was a veteran. So she liked a couple of pro-veteran memes because I want to support our troops, go team, I love my brother. And almost immediately thereafter, pages with names like Freedom Eagle 1776 were sending her messages about how Obama was going to round up all political dissidents and put them in concentration camps. There is a known psychology of the human mind. It's called conservatism bias. It is not about being a conservative. It is about our natural tendency to seize on the first piece of information we have on any topic and treat that as the truth. It wins out unless we are somehow genuinely forced to reassess the situation. We all have conservatism bias. I have conservatism bias. You have conservatism bias. It's why we say you only get one chance to make a first impression, because to a certain degree, that first impression is going to be you forever. And these people had not necessarily heard of any of these topics before, had not encountered any of these concepts, and suddenly they are being given first information by bad actors. And then they turn around to Fox News, which is where all of these bad actors are telling them to go. And that is how we wind up with masks are a form of government control. The liberals want to trans your kids, all of this stuff. It's coming from people who have an active vested interest in controlling the minds of people that have no power at all. So I don't think you can be evil in this situation unless you are in a position of power that you are using to hurt others. You can be selfish, you can be a victim of conservatism bias, and you can be refusing to take in new information and reassess.
And cognitive dissonance.
Yes. My baby sister is a hairdresser in California. When Gavin Newsom started talking about locking the state down again during the most recent wave, she had a complete meltdown because there were no protections. There was no money for her. There was nothing to make sure she could make her station rent and wasn't going to lose everything that she had worked for her whole life. There was just her government leaving her to die. And she could not handle the cognitive dissonance of the government, who I've been told is trustworthy, is just going to leave me to die because I'm not worth saving.
So let's kind of take the next aspect of this, because one of the things that's been interesting to watch is, and again, having worked in a lot of business continuity and DR around the current pandemic, looking at what people regard or do not regard as trustworthy information. So if you're looking at what you're writing, what you're working with in the future, and the idea of how people regard science and technology, how do you think that this may change what you're working on or what we may see? So Lola, how about you?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Well, if we look at the idea, we've seen a lot of people who building on what Shauna was just saying, if we've seen a lot of people who see a Facebook post or a Facebook meme that then instantly are a professor of virology, from a couple of posts. The idea of science and technology is one of those things that always creates the potential for fear, for misunderstanding, or not understanding even the facts of what you're being given, because you don't necessarily have the understanding or the education or anything to really dive into and understand what something actually means versus how you're reading it. If you want to regard it as don't understand the technicalese, but you understand enough of the words that just to trigger fear or misunderstanding or the wrong approach. Is this something that's going to influence you in work going forward?
I always have a certain amount of satire in my writing, and sometimes I make fun of my characters. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I like to sometimes make characters who say really ridiculous things so that other characters can call them out on it. I don't know why I think that's fun. I just do. So I have a feeling I will probably be making more characters who say ridiculous things so that other characters can call them out on it.
Misty?
Well, I'm one of the most suspicious people in the world. And so when I hear something, when I read something on Facebook, or I hear something being bandied about, I immediately go start hunting, because I just don't trust that anybody's telling the truth anymore. I mean, it was bad before, but it's really bad now. And so I will immediately turn to my husband and go, have you heard of this? What do you think? Have you checked this out? And if he has, then he'll tell me what he's heard, and we start comparing. And so that does come across in some of my characters, that natural suspicious nature comes through in one character that I'm writing particularly. And I don't see it going away, because it's still the way that I deal with the world. I have to just check everything and make sure that it's real before I'll believe it. And it's nice to have to at least write one character that I can kind of bounce that off of and say, this is not me, but it's me. So, and I'll continue to do that, because it's the only safe way. If you just accept everything you hear at face value, then you're going to end up with that information making its way through. And I just don't want to do that. So.
Richard?
This is a bit of a hard left in stories, but for anyone who's familiar with the Wheel of Time, there is one particular plot thread that fans have universally reviled, which is when a side character hears a fourth hand rumor that one of the main characters has killed his mom, and refuses to ever accept that the main character could actually be a good guy, and makes it his life's mission pretty much to go try to find and kill him, the main character. And everyone was just like, this person has been otherwise actually pretty level-headed, good military leader, is one of the good guys himself. And fans have always really came down that, oh, Gawain is an idiot. that just never made any sense. He was shown 3,000 times that this wasn't actually what happened. And now it's, pairing with, the conservatism bias that Seanan brought up. It's like, yeah, it's actually something that I think is more plausible now, that is going to be a more believable plot point, that even someone who does otherwise guard against bad information, that has a healthy dose of suspicion, can still, with the right emotional trigger or what have you, to accept, or even just in a moment of not being on guard, can take something in and hold it as a truth in their heart, and just refuse to, and just hold that cognitive dissonance against any proof otherwise further on. And so it's like, I used to think that was the idea of holding the idiot ball, that old trope. It doesn't feel as bad a trope anymore.
Well, there's so much information. There's so much coming at us. I'm trying to limit how much I look at news, because you look at news and it's like stuff from all over the country, all over the world. And I'm like, do I really need to know this? And I don't have time to research every article I read. So I'm just starting, unless it has to do with like my area or something really global, like obviously a pandemic or, gay rights, trans rights, abortion rights, things like that. Unless it's something that's really going to affect a broad swath of people, I just don't read it because I don't have time to figure out what's what.
So Seanan, how about you? Because you've obviously done a tremendous amount of research over the years.
So much research. So I think the problem here is substantially larger than just the moment that we're in. If you look at media, especially American media, basically turning in the 1950s, we went from being a let us laud science and research and intelligence to let us mock it. We have moved away from scientist as hero and into scientist as either villain or laughingstock very firmly. And that is consistent across all forms of American media. We don't really introduce new scientists. We've started moving into engineers in the last couple of years because of the rise of people like Elon Musk and Tesla and all of that stuff. But the diminishing of intellectual pursuits has been going on for quite some time. One of my sisters is a librarian. She's a high school librarian. The kids that come to her library who have grown up with the internet, with the ability to Google and Wikipedia, they don't know how to research because they never had to. No one taught them how. So you're not teaching comparison of information. We're not teaching analysis of information. We're not teaching people how to understand the fire hose of data that is existence in the real world. And that is a cultural problem, not just a Panini problem. It's just that this is a situation where my failure to absorb and understand the research can impact your life, and that's not great. And some of that has been a concerted effort, again, by the people at the top of the food chain that I will happily refer to as evil. Things like Exxon has a published report from the year I was born saying that if we didn't cut carbon emissions, we were going to break the planet. But if they didn't cut carbon emissions, they could make so much money. Mm-hmm. I live in Seattle, Washington. We don't have air conditioning here. That is not a thing we have ever needed. Earlier this week, I was literally rubbing my cats down with a damp washcloth because they were so hot I was afraid of heat stroke. Broke the world. And part of that was a concerted effort by the people who had the data to make sure that the data was discredited and that you couldn't understand the data. There has been a willful and intentional erosion of, critical thinking and research skills in society.
Fraser?
And also, can I
And I blame the public schools. Oh.
I was just going to interject something. I had a thought. It's a little bit of a mean thought, but some of the anti-intellectual people, I think maybe they know that they're not smart, and so it makes them feel better to put other people down. So it makes them feel better to say, "Oh, that's just ridiculous. That's just stupid. No one ever do that." Those liberal leftists and all that stuff. I think it's a way of making them, feel better about themselves. That's all.
I
then you also got the school systems that decided to buy into teaching to the test instead of teaching what children needed to know. And so teachers are now stuck with a list of standards that they have to get through in a school year so that students can pass an arbitrary test. I worked in a middle school for years and years as a librarian, and I felt so bad for those teachers because they were trying their hardest to get their students quickly to research, but there just wasn't time to get it right.
Fraser?
I have a lot of characters in my stories will get stuff wrong, not necessarily anything important, but they'll misremember quotes or history dates or words. For something of this scope, working that in, I think the hook would be, for me, if I were using it, would be what Richard was talking about, the emotional trigger, why they don't want to believe it, why they are determined to believe something wrong, why is it the group that they are with? Is it they don't want to stand up and disagree with their minister or their father, and work on that, because that would be more interesting to me than just having somebody who embraces the bullcrap.
I'd like to just share that while I severely dislike my father and am estranged from him, he is a fairly sharp person. He is a very intelligent person.
Okay, no disrespect to him intended.
No, all the disrespect intended to him.
Oh, okay.
Because he also, when I was learning about climate change in 8th grade, was so vehemently telling me that it was crap. That's like this isn't the truth. This isn't that isn't real. And he knew because he worked for a coal company, and they had scientists, and they told him. He saw those reports. He read those reports. And so he had his experts that were told were scientists, and had read multiple reports from these funded, from people with PhDs that were on the company dime. And had, again, it became just part of it was part of his identity that he is a coal miner. And when they say that we need to reduce coal emissions, he took that in as they say, I don't deserve to have a job. And
He's a company man.
He was a company man. Actually, literally, he was not in the union. He was company. So like he was higher up in the in the pecking order. Like he was a safety not inspector, but he was over HR and safety at his coal mines. And yeah, he just would not believe, and does not to this day believe, that climate change is real.
Let's kind of
My
pivot.
father, years ago, when we first got our first electric car, it was a Nissan Leaf. And my father kept saying, it's going to catch fire in your driveway. It's going to catch fire in your driveway. Well, then we leased that one for 3 years. We returned it. We leased another one for 3 years. And now we're driving a hybrid, and nothing's caught fire yet. But my dad's like, it's going to happen. He just can't. He can't let go of the idea that climate change is nonsense, and all these electric cars are just silly and dangerous. So,
well, let's kind of pivot back into storytelling a little bit. So one of the things that we fundamentally have always relied on in story to talk about disease in many different ways is, kind of we frequently we've already talked about the zombies and the great zombie apocalypse. But I mean, even stories of vampires especially were very much tied to disease. What other sorts of characters like that, figures of mythology, legend, or other types of characters would you use in terms of conveying how disease is working, how the mythology is working, and how would you characterize or even potentially change some of these historical figures and characters to reflect kind of that aspect? So Seanan, I'll actually throw that one to you first.
Most of our monsters, when we really dig down into them, are the fear of infection. It seems silly to us today because of what I call the Ayla effect. If you ever read Clan of the Cave Bear, this chick invents everything. She invents sewing, she invents domestication, she invents orgasms. And they're all things we have heard of in our modern world. We assume that, of course, she invented them. Everyone before Ayla must have been just not very intelligent, or they would have done them because these were obvious things. But when you actually look at human history, it took us millennia to come up with some of these concepts. And germ theory is one of those things. For a really long time, we didn't understand germ theory. We didn't understand that it wasn't miasma coming in your open window at night. So one of your kids got sick, and then all the other kids got sick, and you didn't think it was because you left the first sick kid in the room. You thought it was because a vampire was coming down your chimney and eating the children. You know, so vampires, very much a fear of disease. The modern zombie, which is not a classical monster unless you reinterpret it as a modern manifestation of the ghoul or revenant, absolutely a fear of disease. Most of the big monsters, you know, the Blob, Godzilla, the Fishman, they're a fear of mutation, which is also a fear of disease. It's a fear of people becoming other. The werewolf is 100% just straight up fear of disease. Even a man who's pure of heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolf's name moons and the autumn moon is bright. You know, this comes for us all. All of our monsters root back to pathogen in one way or another, because that is how we tend to externalize the fear of death. And we have to know that we can defeat it. I think the thing that's been the worst for a lot of us about the current ongoing pepperoni is that all of the things the stories told us would fix this didn't work. We got a vaccine. It's not a sterilizing vaccine. You have fun with that. We set up quarantines. It didn't kill the disease fast enough. You have fun with that. You know, all of the things that the stories have presented to us as a quick, simple answer failed. And the thing about monsters in stories is that you have to know how to defeat them. That is the inherent nature of the plan.
Fraser, anything you want to add?
I did not follow the question, I'm afraid.
Well, when we look at creatures of myth and legend, you know, they're all frequently tied exactly to that, to disease, to ailments, to death. I mean, that's really what we tie them to. So is your interpretation based on our experience of what's happened going to change how you would use some of those creatures?
I think it might change how people will react to them, because even if they know what it is, as we have seen, it is very easy to get the wrong information out there, or to choose to believe the wrong information, or to have bad actors spread it. But beyond that, I don't think so.
Lola?
I'm not sure I'm interpreting the question right, but I'm going to just say something anyways. I think that we will get a lot of more stories where monsters maybe have they've adapted to become like I don't know, more the dominant species over regular humans. Like maybe something infected them and they transformed, their DNA transformed, and we'll have more stories where they're the dominant you know, personages in the world and not us, and that'll be interesting.
Misty?
I don't think I'm going to change how I approach monsters, really because it is such an ingrained feeling that has been around humans for so long that I don't foresee myself changing how I write monsters. Happen to pop up in my stories, so which I don't know, because fantasy.
Richard?
So in 2017, I think it was, I wrote a stage play about werewolves, and very much wanted to approach it from a pandemic plague point of view, to the point that it broke out during a war. There was a werewolf infection, and a lot of the backstory revealed through dialogue is that the military went to incredibly draconian measures to try and stamp it out. Anyone even remotely suspected of being werewolf was put under incredible duress, under isolation, to try to force them to change on a full moon. But I do think werewolves in general are going to possibly get a spike, because there's the idea of remission with werewolves, that when it's day, when it's not the full moon, the person's normal, might not even realize that they're the werewolf. That there is more, hope for a cure. I think that is something that a lot of monster stories have been leaving out in the metaphor, or the modern metaphor of disease, is the idea that we could possibly cure. There could be a cure that develops. There could be the matter of being a typhoid Mary. That you could be a carrier. You could just get not very. I only had a mild case of vampirism, but I got over it. I'm fine. But what happens if I'm just in remission and it resurfaces and I have long vampirism now?
You're only a bloodsucker on weekends, Richard.
Only on weekends.
Or you're only doing steak right now.
Yeah,
raw steak.
yeah. I just need the raw steak. I need that myoglobin. Yeah. So I think that there is some potential new things to plumb, or maybe things that have been plumbed and can be plumbed again, because they're going to be feeling a little fresher, in getting some more of the variety, as was mentioned earlier. It's like, so often we focus on the death. We don't focus on, the debilitating after effects of surviving. We don't focus on the societal effects of just having gone through these things. That even if you get over it, it scars. Can leave scars. So it's I think that is where monsters can be, the mythological monsters that we're used to can potentially take us.
So one last question just to look at, and I'm going to kind of throw this out and see who wants it first, which could be dangerous, but hey, we're here talking Contagions. Is there anything left we really haven't kind of talked about tonight about contagions, pandemics, disease, anything along those lines that you guys want to make sure we've talked about?
We learn the structure of things from stories. We learn how to react to situations by either hearing about other people having been through those situations or reading about them before we experience them ourselves. And I was mentioning that we've had a lot of media conditioning and such to bring us as a collective toward thinking certain ways. So one of the most dangerous narratives that we have encouraged and nurtured over the last 60 years, really since vaccination started becoming widespread, and thus the great King Pox was dead and disease was not the reason you were having 8 children so that 2 of them might hit adulthood, is this idea that breaking quarantine is somehow valorous. Right after the first lockdown, I read a brand new, just published pandemic novel that made me so angry I wound up going and drowning it in the swamp. It presented a fast-acting form of super rabies that if you got infected, you were going to be rabid within the hour. It was functionally a rage plague zombie virus. And the main character's best friend, who was a pregnant woman, got bitten. So the main character smuggled her out of the quarantine zone. And this was presented by the book as the honorable, righteous thing to do throughout. Many people died because she made this choice. An entire bus full of pregnant women died because this one pregnant woman who was already infected had to be saved. I am not saying anytime someone gets sick, we lock them in a box to die. I have been quarantined at various points throughout this situation. I've quarantined whenever I could throughout my life. But presenting this narrative idea that if you break quarantine because you want to, you're the hero, is dangerous and bad. And we need to stop.
I think that's the selfishness of people. You put yourself in that situation, you're like, I don't want to be quarantined. I want to go and have fun. I want to go out. And so you think that's the right thing to do. And that's heroic because people are so individualistic and so selfish that they only see what they want.
Does anybody else have anything they
Yeah,
wanted
it's
to?
the I want. No, I was just agreeing. It's that whole I want a culture. What I want should be most important,
This
regardless of
America.
anybody else's safety or security. Yeah, this is America. Yahoo! So
Also, I
yeah,
think we
it
have
drives me crazy.
a long tradition of treating people who break unreasonable and stupid rules as the rebel, cool anti-hero.
Good point.
We are not good about remembering the boundary between breaking bad rules and breaking good rules and being a flaming jackass. This is a
Very good
consistent
point.
problem in real life too.
Not
I-
every.
I was gonna say, I've seen there's a Captain America frame that often gets shared around of him saying that, you know, if other people are wrong, you plant yourself in and stand in the way of what you know is right.
It's the no you move.
Mhm.
No, yeah, no, you move.
Mhm.
The no you move image. And I've always found that image problematic because it can be read by both sides. I mean, who is the arbiter of who gets to say that I am the valorous one or not? And so I very much agree with Seanan that storytelling is the power of, you know, we need to not represent these things like, you know, selfish need as a valorous.
It's cool. It's
goal.
cool to be Han Solo until people get killed.
Yeah,
By
and
innocent people.
yeah, and it is a just that individualistic drive, the you know, in a society that is much more individual based and focused as opposed to communal based and focused, that it's, you know, no one can tell you, you know, if you feel in your heart of hearts that you are right, then you're right. And that is a dangerous thing, and a very dangerous thing to continue to enforce with, you know, or you know, to drape things in. That it just makes, yeah, I would have been disgusted at that scene too. That it's, you know, the same thing as, oh, I'm gonna, you know, keep my friend's zombie bite hidden. Why? You know what's happening. And yes, there's the cognitive dissonance, and I think those scenes can be shown, but the narrative needs to show that this is a bad thing, not be presented as they are somehow helping their friend or helping.
It's more. It needs to be framed as a downfall.
Yeah, it's a downfall.
Right.
It is a bad decision. Trademark.
Yeah, this is when the makeshift village collapsed because one person was, you know, selfish and wanted to go to the disco.
Mhm.
You know, yeah.
Well, before we get out of here, and Seanan, I'm going to ask you to do one last thing. Since you always like to write the posts that kind of give people tips how to continue to do conventions safely, and you just got through at San Diego Comic-Con, and we've got a lot of big conventions coming up. Do you want to kind of give a few people or a few tips on how to handle that safely?
So first up, conventions should not be happening right now. There are good reasons that some of them are happening, but if you can't go, if your safety is staying home, the convention shouldn't be happening anyway. You're missing nothing. If for whatever reason you're a vendor who depends on conventions for your income, you're a professional who's being asked to go for the sake of being able to continue paying your power bill, you know, whatever your reasons are, that is not mine to judge. So if you need to go, get a good, well-fitting mask. Wear your mask 100% of the time when you are in an enclosed space with someone that is not sharing your hotel room. Don't wear your mask all day at the con and then go eat at the Applebee's. You will catch a disease at the Applebee's. Congratulations, not worth it. The food's not that good. Keep your mask on at all times. That also means that if you're in the convention center or in the hotel dealer's room, you don't unmask to take a drink or eat a bite. You know, it's okay to have dietary restrictions. You can take the time to exit. Make plans that allow you to leave. Make plans to keep your electrolytes up. Just do a really big breakfast, drink as much water as you can hold, and then plan to power through. We cannot all medically do that, but if you are someone who medically cannot do that, it is probably worse for you to catch something that is currently airborne than it is to stay home. You'll note that stay home comes up a lot. That is how we protect ourselves. We don't go out if we don't have to. The latest pandemic that is spinning up and having a lovely time is called monkeypox. We're really enjoying this orthovirus resurgence. Woohoo! It has a fomite transmission rate. I'm pretty sure I said this on camera already, but that means that once I have touched this salt shaker, if I have monkeypox, it is now a contagion vector. You touch nothing. If you must touch something, you sanitize your hands immediately afterward. If you are flying to a convention, you take a Clorox wipe to literally everything your body or your clothing will be in contact with before you sit down. Ditto buses and trains. You don't hug people. Physical contact is the easiest way to spread this. For many people, any disease can be mild. I am not saying you have to protect yourself from all things forever. I am saying that right now we have one novel pandemic. We have something our bodies literally don't know how to understand, and that our scientists are still trying to research the long-term effects of, that attacks the circulatory system, and that's not a party. And we have one that we actually do understand fairly well. Monkeypox is well known. We understand how it transmits. We understand how it progresses. It is not an STI. It's just a disease that if you have it and don't recognize it, because literally no one has seen a pox virus in America in 30 years, and you have sex with someone, you will almost certainly transmit it because your sweaty bodies are rubbing against each other, and there's those fomites again. So please just stay masked in a well-fitting mask at all times, even if you're uncomfortable. I compare masks to my bra fairly frequently. I don't take my bra off on the convention floor just because I don't like what my underwear is doing. You shouldn't take your mask off on the convention floor just because you don't like what your earpiece is doing. Don't eat indoors. That's not safe yet. I know that sucks. I hate it too. I miss Outback Steakhouse more than I ever dreamt I would, but don't. You're just going to throw all of your good planning away. Also, bring is it far enough in that I can say the word now?
Yes.
Bring COVID tests with you to the event. Test before you go in and continue to test every day. That will not necessarily tell you if you picked something up while you were there, but it will let you know that you are not currently unknowingly spreading. When you get home, make sure you can isolate completely for 5 days, which is very much a privileged thing to say, because if you were taking time off your job to go to this convention, how are you going to isolate for 5 days? Do you have those extra 5 vacation days? But if you cannot isolate completely, plan to wear a mask at all times. Treat the world like a surgical operating room. And your chances will be better of getting through these big shows that should not be happening.
The more you know.
Well, I appreciate you doing that and giving the good tips. So before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys. Website, social media, anything you've got coming up or you're wanting to promote. So Richard, you're up first.
I'm Richard Fife. You can find me at richardfife.com. All my social media links are at the top of the page. And you can find my book on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Seanan?
Spell my name, you can find me. You may also find Mira. Mira does have a Twitter profile and a Facebook page. Mira does not exist, so she does not update those things. So just Seanan. I am 100% of the Seanan McGuires who are not sheep farmers in Ireland. So I'm pretty easy to locate. And I have a lot of books. They're available basically wherever books are sold, except for Jim's yard sale. They're not there.
Yeah, I'm not having a yard sale this week, so we're good. Fraser?
I'm Fraser Sherman. You can find me online at frasersherman.com and as Bogateer5 on Twitter. I have a book, The Aliens Are Here, about alien visitors in movies and TV, coming out probably later this year, and a Gaslamp novel, Questionable Minds, coming out in November, self-published.
Lola?
My name is Lola Strickland. You can search me on Google. I'm all over the place, and you'll find either me or some dead old ladies, and I'm related to all of them.
And Misty?
I am on mistymassey.com. I'm on Facebook as Misty Massey. I'm Twitter as Misty Massey. And lately, I am now on the TikToks. So I'm learning how to make videos on TikTok, and that's a lot of fun. So if you're interested in pirate fantasy adventures, the newest of which, Kestrel's Dance, just hit bookstore shelves, please come and find me at one of my places, or just go find my book at Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
And I've been your host this evening, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, at the Speculative Fiction Academy, and of course here at ConTinual. And we will see everybody again soon. Thanks much.